It was 5:30 in the morning when Carlos Mendoza walked through the doors of Techdyne Corporation. At 49, this immigrant janitor carried on his shoulders more than just his cleaning supplies. He carried the weight of a dream to give his daughter a future he never had. 15 years earlier, he had left behind an entire life in his home country, driven by the promise of an opportunity for his family, his wife Maria, and his little Sophia. As the sun rose over the Manhattan skyscrapers, he began his daily ritual in the silent, empty corridors of that billion-dollar empire, an invisible man whose dignity was his only unshakable fortune, setting the stage for the powerful people who would soon arrive. Shortly after, a child's voice echoed through the polished hallways. "Dad, you forgot your lunch." Sophia Mendoza, at 12 years old, was a spark of light in that cold corporate environment. Her bright eyes analyzed everything, not with the curiosity of a child, but with the precision of a brilliant mind. At school, she was a prodigy, a force of nature in math and science, solving problems that left her teachers perplexed. She dreamed of one day belonging to that world of technology, not like her father, but as a creator. "One day, I'm going to work here, but not cleaning the floors," she would say, watching the engineers. "I'm going to build amazing things." Carlos felt his heart tighten, a mixture of pride and fear. The hard lesson of invisibility came every day. Executives in expensive suits would pass them as if father and daughter were part of the wall, ghosts in their own world of power. "Dad, why do they look at us like we don't exist?" Sophia once asked, her voice laden with a pain no child should feel. Carlos stopped what he was doing, looked into his daughter's eyes, and repeated the mantra he had taught her since she was little. "Daughter, some people think value is in the money they have, but we know the truth." Sophia completed, her voice firm. "A person's value is in who they are on the inside." That was the foundation of her universe, a truth that in a few short hours would be brutally tested. They were invisible to the world, but they carried a universe of dreams and a brilliant secret. If you believe in the strength of the humble and the power of dreams, subscribe to the channel and like this video to see how the girl no one saw was about to change everything. On the top floor of Techdyne, Richard Sterling reigned over his billion-dollar empire. At 54, the CEO saw the world as an arena divided between winners and losers, and to him, people like Carlos and Sophia were mere pawns, born to serve. His arrogance was a dense fog that prevented him from seeing the humanity on the floors below. "Jennifer, why is the cleaning staff still visible in the hallways?" he used to shout at his secretary. "Their work is important, but their presence is unwelcome. They should be invisible." This was the philosophy that governed his world, a cold indifference that made him blind to the real danger growing not in the corridors, but inside his own command room, right beside him. The true villain, however, did not wear the crown, but coveted it. 2 floors below, Marcus Thompson, the director of technology, harbored a silent, corrosive hatred. Ambitious and calculating, he despised Richard, but his deepest venom was reserved for immigrants, whom he saw as a plague. Seeing Sophia helping her father, a deep disgust consumed him. He saw in them the symbol of everything he wanted to eradicate. His plan was diabolical in its simplicity: to use his privileged access to plant a devastating virus, a digital Trojan horse that would paralyze the company, destroy Richard's reputation, and clear the way for him, the true visionary, to take control. That Monday morning, with a click, Marcus unleashed chaos. The virus spread through Techdyne systems like an invisible fire, consuming everything in its path. In seconds, thousands of screens went black, plunging the company into a sudden, deathly silence. The brain of the billion-dollar giant had been switched off. The silence was then broken by a wave of panic. Screams echoed through the floors. "My computer is dead! The entire system is down. I can't access anything." The corporation, which processed millions per hour, was completely paralyzed, vulnerable, And at the center of the storm, Richard Sterling ran desperately, not knowing that the architect of his ruin was watching him with a cold, satisfied smile. In the makeshift command center, Richard Sterling's arrogance had crumbled, giving way to raw panic. He paced back and forth, his face red, his hands trembling. "Every minute we're down is $1 million loss. Fix this now," he yelled, his voice distorted with distress. Beside him, Marcus Thompson played the part of a loyal, concerned lieutenant, but his eyes gleamed with secret satisfaction. He offered solutions he knew wouldn't work, while subtly suggesting that Richard should prepare the board for the worst. Each word a shovelful of dirt on the professional grave he himself had dug for his boss. The room was a theater of desperation, and the villain was the only one who knew the script. Meanwhile, on the lower floors, Sophia and Carlos heard the echoes of chaos. Through the security monitors, Sophia watched the executives running like ants in a disturbed anthill. Her mind, however, didn't see disorder, but a pattern. "Dad," she said, her voice calm and analytical, "complex systems like this don't just stop all at once by accident. They have protections, redundancies." Carlos looked at her, surprised. "What do you mean, sweetie?" Sophia pointed to the dark screens. For everything to go black simultaneously, someone had to break the protections on purpose. Someone from the inside. While the city's greatest experts saw a catastrophic failure, the 12-year-old girl saw, with terrifying clarity, the signature of a crime. The hours dragged on, and the crisis room filled with the brightest minds in New York's tech scene. Teams of elite consultants, programming geniuses, all threw themselves at the problem, and all failed. The virus created by Marcus was a masterpiece of destruction, a digital labyrinth with no apparent exit, built by someone who knew every corridor and every secret door of that data castle. "We've never seen anything this sophisticated," admitted the leader of one of the teams, defeat written on his face. With every minute, Techdyne bled millions, and hope dwindled. The failure of the experts, one after another, was proof that technical knowledge alone was not enough to fight an evil so intimate. Desperate, Richard made a drastic decision. "I'm calling the FBI. If this was sabotage, I want a full investigation." The mention of the FBI was the stone that finally caused a crack in Marcus's mask. For a split second, genuine panic flashed in his eyes. He tried to cover, arguing that an investigation could delay the recovery even further, but it was too late. Hidden, watching through a crack, Sophia saw that flicker of fear. To her logical mind, that was the confession. The theory became fact. She no longer had just a suspicion, but a certainty. She knew who the villain was. The question was, how could an invisible girl prove it to a world that refused to see her? Far from the crisis room on the middle floors, the news of the disaster spread like a whisper of fear. Sarah, the secretary who always treated Sophia with kindness, and Mike, the security guard who saw a special spark in the girl, watched the panic with heavy hearts. They saw the arrival of the expert teams, men in dark suits carrying expensive equipment, and felt the initial wave of hope slowly being replaced by anguish. For them, the crisis wasn't about millions of dollars on the company's balance sheet. It was about the hundreds of ordinary people, their colleagues and friends, whose jobs and families were now on the line. They were the eyes of the rank and file, the soul of the company, and they saw the human dimension of the catastrophe that the executives could only measure in financial losses. While the geniuses of technology were failing upstairs, the memory of Sarah and Mike turned to the true brilliant mind in that building. Mike remembered the day he gave Sophia an old programming book, and a week later, the girl came back to discuss complex algorithms with a fluency that left him speechless. Sarah recalled conversations at lunchtime when Sophia, with the simplicity of a child, would explain concepts of quantum physics that she could barely follow. They both knew. They had witnessed Sophia's genius firsthand, a secret shared among the humble, a treasure hidden right under the noses of the powerful, who were too blinded by their own reflections to see. The frustration grew with each passing hour. Watching the parade of expensive experts admitting defeat, Mike commented to Sarah, his voice laden with a bitter irony. "It's unbelievable. The smartest person in this building is probably changing a trash bag in some office right now." They looked out into the corridors and, at times, saw the silhouette of Sophia and Carlos, continuing their work with a quiet dignity amidst the corporate apocalypse. They felt a helpless hope. What could they do? Suggest to the panicked CEO that the janitor's 12-year-old daughter might have the answer. They would be ridiculed. So, they kept their secret, a silent prayer that somehow the miracle they knew of would find a way to reveal itself. At 4 in the afternoon, the desperation at Techdyne had reached catastrophic proportions. 8 of the country's best expert teams had declared themselves defeated. Richard Sterling, the CEO, was on the verge of a breakdown, a general watching his army be decimated by an invisible enemy. The company had already lost millions, and with every tick of the clock, the abyss of bankruptcy drew closer. In the crisis room, the air was that of a funeral. Hope had died, and the most powerful men in the city just stared at the dark screens, awaiting the inevitable execution of their futures. The empire was on its knees, and no one, absolutely no one, knew how to save it from the darkness that was consuming it from within. While the tech elite failed, Sophia conducted her own silent investigation. Using her father's access pass, she moved through the building's technical areas not as a lost child, but as an explorer in enemy territory. Her brilliant mind absorbed the network's architecture, mapping every server, every connection, building a 3-dimensional model of the company's digital nervous system. She formulated a hypothesis, a powerful intuition about where the heart of the operation was, and consequently the origin of the attack. Upon hearing the experts admit defeat and raise the suspicion of an inside job, she knew her time had come. The time for invisibility was over. She walked to the door of the crisis room, her heart pounding, but her mind sharp as a razor. She took a deep breath and entered. "Excuse me," she said, her voice small but clear, cutting through the funereal silence. "I think I can help." The effect was surreal. 25 of the country's top experts turned to stare at a 12-year-old girl in simple clothes, standing in the doorway. Richard looked at her with pure irritation. Carlos appeared behind her, embarrassed. "Sophia, let's go, we shouldn't bother them." But the girl didn't move. Looking directly at the CEO, she stated with unshakable confidence, "I've studied computers in school. I know what kind of problem can cause this." Before Richard could dismiss her, Marcus Thompson exploded in a disproportionate rage. "This is ridiculous," he bellowed, his face red with poorly disguised panic. "A child, a janitor's daughter, wanting to teach us how to do our jobs." His attack was cruel and direct, using Sophia's and her father's status as a weapon of humiliation. "Security, get these people out of here, always meddling where they're not wanted." The violence of his reaction was the seed of the turn. It was such an overreaction, such an aggressive defense, that some of the more attentive experts, like the leader of one of the teams, looked at Marcus for the first time with a new and dangerous suspicion. He didn't seem like a concerned director. He seemed like a criminal afraid of being discovered. Her courage was met with hatred and prejudice. But why is he so afraid? If you felt the injustice of this moment, share your story in the comments and subscribe to the channel, because the truth is about to be revealed in a shocking way. Humiliated, but with a will of steel, Sophia knew that words would not convince those men. She needed irrefutable proof. That same night, while the city slept, the 12-year-old girl embarked on the most dangerous mission of her life. Using her father's master key, she entered the dark tower of Techdyne, not as the janitor's daughter, but as an investigator. Guided by her photographic memory, she found the main server room, the pulsating brain of the corporation. There, surrounded by the humming of computers, the real Sophia awakened. For hours, her fingers flew across the keyboard, deciphering code and navigating firewalls with a skill that the city's experts did not possess. In the digital heart of the company, she found not only the virus, but the signature of its creator, Marcus Thompson. The revelation, however, was much darker than simple sabotage. Sophia discovered a hidden folder with emails proving that Marcus had been selling company secrets to competitors for months. His plan wasn't just to take power, it was to get rich by betraying everyone. And then she found the final horror, a second virus, a digital time bomb programmed to activate in 48 hours, designed to permanently erase all company data, including the personal and banking information of thousands of employees. He was a monster, willing to destroy innocent lives out of pure greed. The next morning, in the emergency meeting, the desperation was palpable. That's when Sophia entered the room, no longer with the hesitation of a child, but with the authority of someone who carries the truth. "Mr. Sterling," she said, ignoring Marcus, "I know exactly how to fix everything." Marcus, seeing the certainty in her eyes, panicked. "This is absurd. We can't let a child touch our systems," he shouted, physically trying to block her path. But his exaggerated reaction only fueled the suspicions that were already beginning to surface. "Marcus, step aside. Let her speak," said the leader of one of the expert teams, his distrust clear in his voice. The tide was turning. With a clear path, Sophia approached a terminal. "Actually," she said to the room, "I don't need much time. I just need to show you who created the virus, when it was installed, and who he was selling our secrets to." Her fingers moved with astonishing speed. Marcus ran to try to stop her, but it was too late. The main screen in the boardroom lit up, displaying the virus's code with the name Creator Marcus Thompson highlighted. Then, a cascade of evidence, the emails to competitors, the plans for the second attack, his hateful comments. Marcus froze, exposed, digitally executed by the girl he considered invisible. The irrefutable evidence shone on the screen, a digital testament to Marcus's betrayal. With nowhere to run, his mask of professionalism disintegrated, revealing the monster of hate beneath. "This company should be mine," he screamed, his voice distorted with rage. "I won't be defeated by dirty immigrants who come to steal our jobs." In a final act of desperation, he lunged and grabbed Sophia's arm. "You destroyed everything, you filthy little brat." Before security could react, Carlos, moved by a protective paternal instinct, threw himself between them. "Get your hands off my daughter," he roared, no longer as a humble janitor, but as a lion defending his cub. The violence of Marcus's final act sealed his fate. The chaotic scene ended as quickly as it began. The security guards subdued Marcus, who struggled and shouted insults, and dragged him out of the room. His downfall was as spectacular as his arrogance. With the villain removed, a heavy but different silence took over the room. It was a silence of shame, of reflection, and of a newfound respect. Richard Sterling, the powerful CEO, looked at the 12-year-old girl who was trembling slightly next to her father. His eyes, once cold and distant, were now filled with a raw emotion. In a choked voice, he made the first declaration of the new era of Techdyne. "Sophia," he said for all to hear, you saved our company." Richard, however, knew that a simple thank you was not enough. He walked over to Carlos and Sophia, and in front of his entire team and the city's top experts, he bowed his head in a gesture of humility. "I need to apologize," he said, looking them in the eye. "I was blind. I treated you as if you were invisible, and that blindness almost cost us everything. I allowed an environment of prejudice to exist right under my nose, and the lesson you taught us today, Sophia, is one I will never forget." The public apology, coming from such a proud man, was an earthquake that shook the foundations of the company's culture, promising a reconstruction. based on new values. As federal agents arrived to begin the criminal investigation, Richard began to turn his words into action. "As of today," he announced loudly, "Carlos Mendoza is promoted to General Facilities Supervisor for the entire complex, with a salary that reflects his character and dedication." Carlos was speechless, tears streaming down his face. "And Sofia Mendoza," Richard continued, turning to the girl, "is appointed our new special consultant for systems security. Techdyne will fund her education to the highest level, and she will work with us to develop a program for young talents." In an instant, the invisible girl and her humble father became essential pillars of the company that had scorned them. To seal the transformation, Richard made one last announcement, the most powerful of all. "And so that today's lesson is never forgotten, we are immediately establishing the Sofia Mendoza Scholarship Fund to finance the university education of the children of all our employees who demonstrate exceptional talent regardless of their origin or position." At that moment, the room erupted in a thunderous ovation. It was applause not just for Sofia and Carlos, but for the promise of a more just future. Beside her father, Sofia cried, not from fear, but from the overwhelming joy of seeing her dream become a reality not just for herself, but for all those who would come after her. That night, the small apartment of Carlos and Sofia was full, not of luxury, but of something infinitely more valuable: love and community. Neighbors, school friends, and work colleagues like Sarah and Mike crowded into the living room, celebrating the victory of the family that, for so long, had been invisible to the world. The joy was contagious, a party for courage and integrity. Maria, Sofia's mother, hugged her with a pride that overflowed from her eyes. For years, they had been the silent force that kept the gears of power turning. That night, they were no longer on the margins, but at the center of the universe, the living proof that true nobility does not reside in a last name or a bank account. Amidst the celebration, Sofia thought of Marcus, probably alone in a cell, consumed by his own hatred. And what she felt was not triumph, but a deep pity for a life wasted on envy instead of creation. Her father approached, his gaze filled with an admiration that words could not express. "You taught me a lesson today, my daughter," he said, his voice choked. "But it was you who taught me about value and dignity," she replied. Carlos smiled. "I taught you how to dream. You taught me that sometimes you have to fight to let the world allow you to dream." In that moment, the cycle of learning was complete. The daughter had also become the teacher. The legacy of that day became ingrained in Techdyne's culture. The Sofia Mendoza Scholarship Fund became a thriving program, opening doors for dozens of talented young people from working-class families. Richard, Sterling, a changed man, began to lead with humility, actively seeking out the voices he once ignored. And Sofia, though still a student, became a respected presence in the company's security meetings, her genius no longer a secret, but one of the corporation's most valuable assets. Her story became a legend, a powerful reminder that the next great solution can come from anywhere, at any time, as long as someone is willing to see. This story reminds us that the world is full of Sofias and Carloses, people of extraordinary talent and profound character who work silently in the shadows, propping up the world of the visible. They are the foundation upon which empires are built. Sofia's journey is an invitation to open our eyes, to see beyond uniforms and job titles, to recognize the genius that lives beside us. Because greatness is not measured by the height of a skyscraper or a bank balance, but by the courage of a heart that, even in invisibility, dares to fight for what is right, and with a single act, illuminates the entire world. The story of Sofia and Carlos reminds us that heroes are everywhere. If you were touched by this journey of courage and dignity, subscribe, like, and comment where you're watching from. Let's celebrate together the voices the world needs to hear.